powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, this is Football at 4.
And Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Geoff Mosher is going to join us, but first, I want to tell you about my friends at American Airlines. And you know the Atlantic City International Airport, you can travel on American Airlines now through ACY, 90 domestic and international destinations. And I was thinking about this the other day because I get itchy. I get like I want to go see a big game somewhere or do something. And we were talking about the Super Bowl, you know, the possibility if the Eagles made the Super Bowl. Well, you could possibly think about that. Save time and money. Avoid the fees and hassle of parking at the big city airport when you can start your next vacation on American Airlines from ACY. Excitement is just one stop away on American Airlines from ACY. Book today at AA.com. And, you know, we have to do, in our world, a little pre-planning. You know, if we're going to like, hey, you want to go to the Super Bowl, Radio Row, we've done that many times in the past. The problem is if you wait until the Eagles are the team that makes it, you have to make the decision. We're just going to go no matter what.
Yeah, whether they make it or not, we're heading out to the desert, which is tough for some, but for people like us, I'm always game.
The flights right now, if you book now, are pretty reasonable. So,
it's now or never.
Saying.
Yeah.
Because, I just to give you a little backstory, I've gone to the Super Bowl plenty of times. We've done the show on Radio Row about 5 or 6 times over the years. But the year that the Eagles went to the Super Bowl, we had not put in for credentials, and we did not kind of do any of that stuff. The Eagles ended up making the Super Bowl. Well, flights to get out there were just astronomical, to the point that I actually left Minnesota a day early because the flight was significantly cheaper to get out of there, and I flew from Minneapolis to Baltimore because the flight to Philadelphia or anywhere was just absolutely astronomical.
Was it World Series astronomical?
Yeah, I'm talking about a flight from Minnesota to Philadelphia to get home, like on the day was terrible. The whole thing was an awful setup. Like to get home on Sunday was astronomical. Monday, the next day, the flight was like 6 o'clock in the morning. So I was like, this is ridiculous. But it was like $1,200 to fly one way back, and I was like, that ain't happening.
Yeah, no, thank you, sir.
No, so I flew out. I flew home on Saturday, and I left Minneapolis, and I went from Minneapolis to Baltimore. And my girlfriend picked me up in Baltimore.
It's a shame you had to leave that excellent weather up there early.
It was the coldest of cold that I ever felt in my entire life. Geoff Mosher, you have felt that cold before. The Minneapolis cold, the Minneapolis bone chill. But do we feel that the Minneapolis is on fire right now? Do we feel that the Minnesota Vikings are the biggest challenger in the NFC to the Philadelphia Eagles, my friend?
I guess so by record. I mean, they've only lost to the Eagles. They've done a really nice job. They win in a variety of ways. It looks like, Mike and Ryan, that they're doing things different defensively as well. The last time we saw the Vikings, they were playing the Jonathan Gannon 2021 style defense, but looks like they've done a better job of stirring things up front. Also, obviously, they added T.J. Hawkinson. He hasn't been great, but he's been better than what they had. And look, I think the Vikings, and then until the Eagles play the Giants, and we see if the Giants can really go toe-to-toe with the Eagles, at least as far as scoring points, then those are the teams right now.
I know that we got Eagles and Commanders tonight, obviously, but let's get a couple thoughts on what happened yesterday from you. Minnesota, okay, they go on the road and beat Buffalo. I don't know what validation that gives anybody about who the Minnesota Vikings are in that win. But what about what happened with the Giants yesterday getting their win? Would you say that the Giants are more of a factor than Minnesota or Dallas?
I don't know if I believe the Giants can hang with the Eagles if the Eagles are having a good offensive day. I just don't know that the Giants can put up enough points if they have enough firepower. But the thing about the Giants being 7-2 is that they normally take the field with a team that has more firepower than them. Very few teams have less firepower than the Giants, but they play excellent defense, and they do a nice job of playing ball control offense, using Daniel Jones, using Saquon Barkley, running the ball, short passing game, and that's what you have to do if you're going to beat the Eagles, right? You got to control the ball for a long amount of time. And then you also have to play really good defense. And the Giants have shown that they can do that. So it'll be interesting to see what happens when they play.
And then, of course, what Dallas did yesterday. I mean, they have a 14-point lead. Like, where is the ceiling for Dallas? We were just talking, Ryan and I, which of the NFC teams that we can literally say, yes, they could win a Super Bowl? Or do we still feel Dallas is in that conversation?
I mean, I don't want to say 9 weeks in that they're not, just because they have 3 losses now. I mean, I think they have a very good pass rush. They're obviously hurting for perimeter weaponry. But, I can't just dismiss them now because they got 3 losses. They have an uphill climb because they're not going to win the division most likely, and they're going to have to get in on a wild card, which means they're going to have to beat out a few teams. But they'll probably be able to do that, get in. And then you never know. You win 4 out of your last 5. You start to get hot. You start to figure things out. And I wouldn't write them off. It just doesn't look very good right now for them. They have flaws.
Yeah, you look at the other 3 teams right now in this division, Moshe. I mean, Washington, this is a huge game for Washington tonight at 4-5. An upset, massive victory over the undefeated Eagles brings them back to 500. And then the NFC playoff picture, really gets intriguing. The Giants have a gauntlet of a schedule coming up, playing 4 straight NFC East opponents. Minnesota's added into that as well. So can Washington catapult themselves into this wild card landscape right now in the NFC?
Well, they're sort of in it just by the nature of that they've got enough. They're at 4-5, right? They're not out of it. They've got to, I would say that they have to be in a 9-win range. So looking at what they've got left, I mean, they still have some games against teams that are probably going to be better than them. And they're going to have a lot of work to do, whether it's tonight or for the rest of the year. I mean, they also have to make a decision sort of based on tonight's game, right? Is like, are they going to go just put Carson Wentz back in the lineup? Or if they win tonight, which would be 3 out of 4, or 4 out of 5 for them, would they stick with Taylor Heineke? To your point, though, I mean, they've got the Texans, the Falcons up. So if they were to win tonight, you would probably like their chances to win the next 2 after that. Then they'll have 2 against the Giants. They'll have the 49ers. Those are tough games. Browns. I mean, they've really sort of got to catch fire here, to be honest. They probably really need to win tonight. But if they do win tonight, it sure does invite a discussion about what they're going to do at quarterback that might complicate things for them.
Let's get into that really quick then. Is a win tonight guarantee the job the rest of the way for Heineke, or even a strong performance maybe in a close loss for Washington? Like, is tonight the deciding factor for Ron Rivera and the Commanders?
Yeah, I mean, probably not, Ryan, only because if you look, it's not like he has stepped in and been an amazing quarterback. I mean, he's been more efficient than Carson Wentz, no doubt about it. But you're not seeing a guy who's, per se, winning the game by himself. I mean, he's had a 200-yard game, a 149-yard game, and then against the Colts, who stunk and probably still stink, he had 279. I mean, he's only had – the best he's done is a 98.7 passer rating. So I have a hard time thinking that they're just going to be like, all right, we're going with Taylor Heineke. If anything, they'll probably go back to Carson, win or lose tonight, try to see if the changes they've made offensively and defensively have the same impact on Carson's game, probably take a little bit less off his shoulders. But if he, stinks it up and they lose 2 in a row against those teams I told you about, Texans, Falcons, then maybe they do kind of switch back again and go for a last-ditch effort there.
Geoff, no Chase Young tonight. And obviously, even if he did play, it was going to be his first game coming back. We know how talented he is. But does that change the perception of the way that Philadelphia should be able to move the ball? I mean, they scored 24 points the last time, but it was all in one quarter. So how does the matchup with this defense look like for you as no Chase Young tonight?
Well, I think it still looks different regardless, because Washington has sort of copycatted what the Eagles are doing, which they weren't doing in the first 3 weeks of the season. They're playing more 5-man fronts, which, as we know, that makes it tougher to run against. You can't double-team guys up front, and that helps out their killer tandem of Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne, who I think are about as good as it gets in this league. So they're doing a little bit more of that. They're obviously running the ball more, which helps them play with ground control. So that's why they've been able to kind of keep games close. But their defense, they released William Jackson. They think their first-round pick from 2 years ago, Jamin Davis, is playing a lot better. So this is a good Washington defense, but they're down two starting linebackers, or two linebackers, I should say. So they're a little bit hurt across the middle. I think that they gave the Eagles a lot of issues last game, just not in the second quarter when the Eagles exploded. So it stands to reason that there'll be a pretty formidable opponent again tonight. I don't think the Eagles are going to just score 38 points just by getting off the bus. But Washington's still going to have to play really well to keep this offense down.
Yeah, and then, of course, on the other side, you Eagles fans out there will look at, Avonte Maddox not call play. So what happens in that spot, and then how does Washington have the talent or the mindset to exploit that matchup?
Probably a little bit. I mean, their offensive line is not any better. So, in fact, that they're still injured. So the one thing Taylor Heineke does is get rid of the ball quickly. And when you do that, you tend to pepper the middle of the field. So the absence of Avonte Maddox will hurt the Eagles in some regards. Plus, the guy who's filling in, Josiah Scott, I mean, he's been out for a little bit with his ankle injury too. So it's not like they're replacing him with a fully healthy guy. They're replacing him with a guy who's also coming off an injury and who was, playing only okay when Josiah Scott was in there. So obviously, Dotson back, Logan Thomas. I mean, those are good interior weapons for Washington, and I'm sure they're going to look to get that going.
Yeah, we're talking with Geoff Mosher. Football for the matchups here. Obviously, Eagles, Commanders. The Eagles' run defense, it's an issue. Will it be an issue against this opponent? How much does Washington lean on the run tonight?
I mean, Washington leans a ton on the run. The first 3 or 4 games of the year, they were averaging 97 rushing yards a game. Since then, it's been 138 rushing yards per game, which is, a huge difference. They run the ball a lot. Now, if you look at their averages, they're not running the ball dynamically. I think Brian Robinson is averaging 3.3 a carry, Gibson 3.8. But for the season, because they used Curtis Samuel in the running game, ever since they went to this, even more running approach with Robinson back, they're averaging about 4.5 yards per carry, which is pretty good. So that's obviously where the Eagles have suffered, and I think that Washington is going to come out and test that right from the start and see if the Eagles are any better at stopping the run than they were against the Texans.
Yeah, you talk about the run defense, 28th right now in the NFL as far as yards per carry. Eagles giving up over 5 a carry right now, and you look at their tackling issues. I think they had 14 missed tackles against Houston.
Yeah.
How much of a concern is that, Moshe, not just for tonight, but the rest of the way?
A little bit. It's definitely a concern. Each week is a little bit different. I would say that while Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson have some talent, they don't run angry like Dameon Pierce. They don't run like they are, propelled by a cannon the way Dameon Pierce ran. So I don't think they're as difficult to tackle. But Gibson is a guy who can take a short pass in the flat, put the Jets on quickly if you don't get on him, and turn a little gain into a big gain. So that is where I would be concerned is, do they tackle well on the edges in the play action passing game, in the flats and screens and things like that? Up front is one thing, but the secondary did a terrible job at tackling against Houston. They got to do better than just throwing those arms at guys.
The other day, Jimmy Johnson had mentioned, the Eagles, the second time around, that their offense is one of those where, hey, you don't see it a lot. They do some quirky things. The first half, I could see teams struggling, and then you go into the locker room, you look and figure it out, you make your adjustments. Well, now they're playing Washington for the second time. This is the first opponent they've played for the second time. Is that something you will be very cognizant of tonight, is watching the adjustments Washington makes to what Philadelphia was successful last time, which was what? Devonta Smith. Hey, man, he had a huge game in that game the last time. Jalen Hurts had a monster second quarter. So do you put any credence into what Jimmy Johnson said, or are we going to find out about that tonight?
I mean, I don't know. I was trying to think about it. And, I think that when a team is undefeated like this and rolling the way they are, we tend to get into paralysis by analysis, like you're trying too hard to figure out what's going on there. If teams are so good at adjusting to what the Eagles are doing, how come on a week-to-week basis they're exploding for 25 points in the second quarter? You would think if you had a week to see what they do on tape, you would not be giving up that many points to a team that early in a game. But the one thing I will say about Washington is they did do a much better job in the second half against the Eagles' offense. And if you look, the Eagles did not run the ball well against Watt. It's like the only team that they haven't ran the ball well against. They only had 72 rushing yards on 30 carries. 2.4 yards per carry in that first game, which is like their lowest yards per carry average since like 2019. So Washington did something right after halftime there. The problem is they were down so much, it almost didn't matter, right? They had to pass so much, and Wentz was getting sacked left and right. I do think this will be a closer game. I think it'll be a competitive game.
Yeah, so real quick, Moshe, we've been asking throughout the day. There's, I don't know if you saw this bet out there. The bettor needs Miles Sanders to have 110 yards or more rushing to win $135,000. So Miles Sanders, over under 110 yards rushing. Are you letting it ride? Are you taking the cash out of $21,000?
Yeah, I'm taking the cash out. I mean, Miles Sanders has had one game this year over 110 yards, and that was against Jacksonville when it was raining and they decided they were going to do basically nothing but run after they fell behind. So this is a really good Washington front line that can stop the run. So I don't see Miles having 110. And if he did, like, I wouldn't want to be sitting there sweating it out. Can you imagine if he finished with like 109, which would be a great game for Miles, but would cost you all that money? So I would just take the 21K and be really, really happy with it.
He bet $10 to win $135,000.
There you go. Enough said.
Why doesn't that happen to me?
Okay. Here's why. So he bet Justin Fields over 110 yards rushing. He bet Jeff Wilson over 80 yards rushing. Najee Harris over 80 yards rushing. Jonathan Taylor over 125. And Miles Sanders over 110. So he has hit every single one of those. He now needs Miles Sanders to get 110. It's $135 if Sanders gets there. If he loses, he only loses $10. But do you just say, I'll take the $21,000? I am certainly taking the $21,000.
100%. I'm not putting that in Miles Sanders' hands.
No, because of everything, Mosher, you just broke down. I mean, I think Washington's run defense is a pretty stout run defense.
Yeah, I would just take the 21K. And funny thing is, of all those names that hit their measuring sticks, the one that surprises me the most is not Jeff Wilson and not even Justin Fields. It's Najee Harris getting over 80 rushing yards?
Over 80, because there was a lot of talk that he was going to be replaced this week.
Exactly. Plus, I mean, even if they gave him 50 carries, I would have said, I don't know if he's going to get 80 yards the way they've been running. So he should just thank his lucky stars and then take the money. That's what I would do.
All right, Geoff Mosher, Inside the Birds. The pregame show is coming up at 5 o'clock. And, of course, Mosher, your pick for the Eagles and the Commanders tonight before we let you roll is what?
I forgot the score, but I picked the Eagles winning a close, like 21-12, I believe.
21-12, an ugly game at the Link. All right, Geoff Mosher, Inside the Birds. Of course, they're back tomorrow for football at 4. Adam Kaplan will be here to recap Eagles and Commanders. Mosher's back on Wednesday. And, of course, you can get all your stuff over at Inside the Birds and all their social media channels. Mosher, take care, buddy.
All right, have a good one, guys.
He likes the Birds 21-12 tonight. Kind of an ugly game